Welcome to Riverdale After Dark, a podcast about the CW's Riverdale that's been in hibernation in its cave, but it's just peeking a little bit of an eye open, kind of taking a look out here to do one more podcast before the show returns in March. I'm Alex.
In the world of Riverdale, writers are gods, like Jughead himself. Keep that in mind. I'm Justin.
I'm Pete.
And as kind of teased pretty terribly right at the top here, we are doing by me. You did it amazingly, Justin.
I was going to say.
We have a special hiatus episode for you with Riverdale writer Brian Paterson. Brian, woo-hoo! Welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you on.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, so excited to talk, so excited that you agreed to do this as well. As you said on Twitter, you're not really an interview guy, so we'll make this nice and smooth and easy.
We're gentle.
Don't
There's
promise
so many
that.
of us.
Don't promise
There's
that.
so many
Are
of
you
us.
going to get harsh, Pete?
Yeah, play it cool.
No,
Hot
but I
shots.
don't know how easy it's going to be.
All right, fair enough. We like to lower your expectations, then Pete likes to heighten them. That's sort of the dynamic of the podcast.
Sure.
But one thing to set up right at the beginning, like sort of let's take it all the way back to the beginning here, because correct me if I'm wrong, but at least in terms of the writing staff, you're sort of the elder statesman at this point, right? You've been there pretty much since the beginning.
Yeah. I've been there since season one. I started out as a staff writer on the show, and there's like a handful of us that are still on that have been there for the entire run of the show. But yeah, it's the first TV show that I've ever written for, at least in scripted. So,
well, then talk a little bit about whatever you can talk about how you got the job. I mean, I think people are kind of familiar in some ways or some aspects in terms of how you get a TV writing job, but you had done a couple of different series before or jobs before, but this being your first full-time writing job, how did you lock it down?
Mm-hmm. I moved to Los Angeles right after graduating from Boston University, and I'd done like an internship my final semester, so I knew I wanted to pursue that route and hopefully get some sort of assistant job in network TV, because that's just what I wanted to write. I knew from the get-go, I wanted to write TV drama. So the company that I interned for ended up failing, and they were basically like, sorry, you're out of luck. And we were going to hook you up with a writer's assistant job, but the plans they had for a show fell through, and that was that. So I was kind of left looking for a job, and it's such an intense industry. It's very difficult to land any sort of paying job right out of college. So I eventually got a job as an assistant on the cable side for a company called Painless Television, and they do reality and documentary type programming. One of their big shows is called The Dead Files. It's on the Travel Channel. So I worked for them for 5 years, but I kept writing on the side and writing pilots and specs. And Warner Brothers actually has a program for aspiring writers every single year that that thousands of people apply for. They have 9 or 10 spots normally. And then once you get into that program, at the end of the program, they will staff you on one of the Warner Brothers shows.
Wow.
So my final year, I think it was 2015. And I was basically kind of if I can't make it happen this year, then I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm probably going to have to move back to New Jersey, because the dream wasn't happening. Even though I had,
man,
yeah,
the stakes were high.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's tough, because I had been there for 5 years and money was running low, and I was like, well, this is it. And I got an envelope from Warner Brothers that said, or a letter from Warner Brothers that said that I had gotten through the first round of the program. So I had to get through another 2. So basically, to get into the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop, you have to submit a pilot, a spec, and then you have like a final in-person interview.
Wow.
And after a couple months, like I got in and completed the program and then staffed on Riverdale. And it wasn't the first show that I interviewed for, but it's the first one that offered me a job. And I spoke to Roberto like in that interview, and I had read the pilot in the Warner Brothers workshop, and I knew that was the show I wanted to write for, without a doubt, because I had read Archie as a kid, and
Nice.
it was, my dad like had this enormous cardboard box full of like old Archie digests, and so I spent a lot of time reading those as a kid, and like seeing this newly reimagined way of like exploring the Archie universe in this pilot was just, it kind of blew my mind. And I got on the show, and it's been this unbelievable ride ever since.
Quick hyper specific question. What did you spec when you had to do a spec for the workshop?
I spec Boardwalk Empire because
awesome.
I love crime and like the gangster drama genre, rather. I guess the show that got me into TV writing was like The Sopranos. So, but the only like kind of gangster show on the air at the time was Boardwalk Empire. I think it had actually even ended maybe the year before. And so I spec that, and the original pilot that I wrote was kind of like this baseball, almost like a Ted Lasso-esque kind of baseball drama.
Cool.
That I haven't looked at in years, but apparently it was decent enough that it got me through to the written or the in-person interview phase.
I love hearing that you're into the crime stuff and the Boardwalk Empire and everything. This is very much jumping way ahead of my list of questions here, but doing Citizen Lodge, that must have felt like coming full circle in a certain way.
It was amazing. Yeah. That episode is so special, and it's so different from a typical Riverdale episode. Yeah. Being able to like explore Hiram's early life was such a fascinating thing. And we really wanted to give him an epic sort of origin story. Like Jughead says, like every villain has a really great origin story. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't let the fans down, and that they could kind of empathize with this guy who's just kind of a monster on the show. And so, that was really like an honor to write that episode. And James DeWill directed the episode, and he's one of our writers who's been on since the beginning. And Roberto like came up with the idea of him growing up in New York and shoe shining with his dad. And like the fact that we got Mark and his son like to do it was so cool. And it was such a really gratifying experience for them as well. So I don't know, it turned out really phenomenal. And I kind of got to achieve my dream of writing a really cool crime episode.
I mean, it's a great episode. I did want to ask you, and this is jumping back a little bit, but I think maybe we can use Citizen Lodge as an example, is, again, I think people don't know exactly what a writer does, say, on a weekly basis. Like, they see their name pop up on the episode, and they're like, they were solely responsible for that. We know that's not true. I think people who are tangentially familiar with the industry also know that's not true. But let's use Citizen Lodge as an example. As much as you can, could you walk us through where the germ of that idea came from, when you were assigned as the writer, what the process was like going through to it ending up on air?
We talked about giving Hiram like a backstory in the room before, kind of like in the beginning of the season, we'll kind of map out where everything's headed and how we can fill up each week with a new episode. And so we got to, I think it was 512, that episode was. We started discussing like his backstory and like what was the thing that made him turn into the guy he is today. We'll talk about the idea in the room. And it was a really great process because it's just, we're like honing in solely on this one character. And there was a Reggie and his father runner in that episode, but it was primarily focused on Hiram. everyone in the room contributes their ideas. And then once we have sort of loose beats for the episode, we will flesh out those beats and write a story area. Then the story area gets submitted to the network, and then the studio and the network, and they give their notes. And then once that's
real quick, a story area is sort of like an outline,
really thorough,
like an extended outline.
Yeah, like a scene by scene breakdown. We even include like dialogue that we will later use in the episode. So once the story area itself is done, it's that much easier to write the episode because everything's already there. I knew from a very early time that I wanted to write this episode. Like once we started talking about it, I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like I have to write this. And
this is my dream, Roberto. Yeah. So I just want to throw that out there to the room.
I actually did text something like that to Roberto, just saying like this idea is so cool. Like I would just putting it out there. Like I would love to write this episode, and he gave me the episode. And awesome. I was so excited to be able to write it.
When you're getting the notes back from the network, I'm sure it depends, again, episode by episode, but how involved are they on a show like Riverdale? Are they sending things like, sounds good, or maybe try a little harder, or are they getting like really in the weeds on the lines, on the scenes, things like that?
The Gargoyle King has sticks for hands? Just checking in on that. Is that true?
Yeah. They're like fairly specific notes that they give. They never get too intense with like line by line notes. I mean, maybe back in season 1, they were a little more strict about certain things, but now, I mean, we're sort of, I think we know the show and they trust us with the content. So the notes are never that crazy. So they're always pretty easy to implement. Yeah, I can't remember the last time anyone's really had to go back and maybe rewrite an entire storyline or something. It's always fairly easy to execute.
Something we talk about a lot on the show is just the pace. I feel like there's no other show on television that delivers on the pace that you guys have over there, as well as just the amount of story and character that you're sort of juggling at the same time. And how do you maintain that? And when you're writing, are you very conscious of that, or do you sort of go back and are like, let's pace it up?
Yeah, Roberto has a real style and feeling for how he wants the show to be, and because we're writing stories for such a vast amount of characters, we really have to get through the scenes quickly. So, on the day when we're shooting it up in Vancouver, a scene might have more sort of space and air in it to breathe. But when we're editing it down for television, we only have 42 minutes. So we really have to be kind of economical and make sure that all of our stories are adequately told and we're not cutting stuff, because sometimes like our scripts will be a little long. So we'll have to go back and cut certain things just to make sure that we're able to tell every story in that episode. So in terms of the pace, it's definitely a fast moving show, and it's like you can't look away for 30 seconds because you'll come back and be like, wait, what just happened? Like, yeah, the ghoulies are back, and so is
that doll alive?
yeah. So it's making sure that we're able to tell every character's story properly.
I just want to say, like, I love the show. I don't want this to come off as the wrong way, but it does seem insane sometimes. Like, is it the kind of writer's room where they're just like, $10 says you can't put a bear in this scene? They're like, oh, I'll do it. You watch me. Like, it just seems like they're stacking some amazing stuff, but like you seem very calm. I thought it would be like the writer's room is it seems like just the amount of ideas and the amount of things in a show episode just is very impressive.
How much gambling is going on to get bears in scenes in the show?
Yeah, it's not. We're not like betting each other if we can make this episode crazier. I mean, it's not really that at all. I'd say it's a pretty composed room. It's a lot of professionals and a lot of really, really smart people, but we always try to tell the most interesting story that we can. And if that happens to be Archie fighting a bear or Cheryl training a group of young students on how to fire a bow and arrow, or Betty going after serial killers, I mean, that's the story we're going to tell.
I did want to go back to your job on the show a little bit, because correct me if I'm wrong, but you became a co-producer in season 4, and that title has changed a little bit. But with season 6, you were a supervising producer, at least for the first couple of episodes. What are your responsibilities in that capacity, and in particular in season 6 as a supervising producer? Here's my very hard-hitting question: what does that mean?
We all go up to Vancouver to produce our episodes. So I guess on other shows, like the higher the title that you have, like maybe you're given a little more freedom to do other things. I don't really know. Like it's kind of like a title only, I would say. It's not, I don't think it would necessarily comes with any certain responsibilities.
But like the lunch menu comes to you first.
Yeah. I get my coffee. Yeah. Well, yeah. My coffee comes out of the K-cup in my kitchen downstairs.
See, that's cool.
Well, particularly right now, as a supervising producer, it's even harder now with COVID, and you guys have been so careful. We've heard from so many people and how great it has been on set in terms of safety, but obviously there's a lot of hardship there in terms of figuring out how to make the set work from the production perspective. So talking, say, again about the episodes in season 6 that you were potentially producing, what was involved there? What has changed over time?
So there's some really strict like COVID testing and protocols that have been implemented up in Vancouver. And because we have those in place, like we have been fairly successful at making sure we get our days done, and we haven't had any huge outbreaks or anything happen yet. We've had a couple days that had to get pushed, but nothing super serious. So it is like a process getting into Canada, and then we have to test 3 times a week out of the 5 days that we're on set. So, if someone tests positive, like, then basically the cast and crew is notified and we assess from there. It's a bit more intense of a process. Like we don't have like a crafty table anymore, for instance. Like you used to be able to just, I know, one of the nicer, nicer things, but, it's just, it's the same sort of process up there, just slightly different.
Well, let's talk about some specific episodes that you worked on. That I wanted to jump back to Chapter 10, The Lost Weekend, which I know you wrote with Britta London. There's a lot of great scenes in there, but there's one that I think I would argue became sort of the first really viral moment from the show, which is the "I'm a Weirdo" speech. Oh, yeah. Which, mind you, I like that speech. I like that scene. I think that's one of the greatest Bughead scenes on the show. But what was it like crafting that scene for the episode, and what did you think about the internet's reaction afterwards?
Yeah, I think we were trying to get underneath Jughead's sort of anxiety and apprehension of having this big party thrown, and he sort of has this meltdown because he does have some trauma, like with his family, and we wanted to get underneath that. And so Roberto helped craft that dialogue, and I guess it just sort of caught on. It was one of those viral things, but we never intended it to be, I guess, this memeable thing. We really wanted it to be more of an emotional moment for him and his girlfriend. Yeah, it was a bit shocking, I would say.
I mean, that's something that I think like Riverdale fans look at when people pull the stuff out of context, and no shade to the amazing No Context Riverdale account, which gets it, who we've had on the podcast. But when you see stuff like that, is that frustrating at all? When you see people being like, Riverdale's crazy, here's one thing, or do you like it because people are talking about the show?
I would say the latter. We're not bothered. I think a lot of the writers on the show actually follow that account, and we think it's hilarious because it's bringing a little bit of happiness to someone's life. And if they want to make a Twitter account and create these funny images, that's totally fine. I actually really like those. I actually really like that account.
Oh, the account's great. I was thinking more about like people who don't watch Riverdale who pull out the scenes and are like, what's going on in the show?
Right.
I feel like that happens at least once a season. Like the Archie sacrifice at the beginning of season 6. People are like, what's going on
so
here?
yeah,
What's happening on the show?
Now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see how that could be taken out of context. But yeah, Riverdale is just one of those shows where if you're in, you're in. And those who actually watch know the show and like have like this encyclopedic knowledge of the show. And yeah, but I can understand how it could be a bit confusing at times.
Another episode that you wrote Noose Titans, which was the episode that canonized Shoney with that incredible scene where Tony rescues Cheryl from the Sisters of the Quiet Mercy. This obviously is a very important episode for a lot of people for different reasons, whether you ship Shoney or you're just into the LGBTQ plus of it all. So what went into the discussions there in terms of canonizing that relationship and also making that episode the one where it was going to happen?
I think there was a certain magnetism between Cheryl and Tony, like in season 2 when we wanted to bring them together because we knew that they would be good in a relationship together. And having it set at the Sisters of Quiet Mercy, that really powerful moment of Tony coming in and while they're being almost like brainwashed, being forced to watch these like re-education films. It was just like a really powerful moment for them. And yeah, it's definitely one of the scenes that sort of stand out from the episodes that I've been able to write and produce along with Britta Lundeen. But yeah, that's a really special episode and one I think is really powerful moment between them.
I'll throw out another one to you just on the powerful for shippers thing, but you also did Lynchian, which introduced Carry the Torch, had the scene with Betty and Archie in the bunker trying to figure out the relationship after they had this kiss during the Hedwig musical. We talked to the music guys a little bit, Leonard J. Jackson and Ryan Paterson, about how that song ended up in the episode. But again, what was the process there like deciding this is how Barchi is going to kind of come together, but then, at least for the time being, break apart?
Yeah, I was there like when we were shooting that day, and it was, again, really powerful moment between Archie and Betty. They had this long history together, and Archie's sort of bearing his soul for Betty in the bunker. But yeah, in terms of the writing the music, like I don't have a whole lot of say in the lyrics or anything like that. So they come up with all that and give it to KJ and KJ sings it. I really love that scene. You really feel it. Like when you're watching this happen on set, you're like, wow, this is like really electric stuff.
Real. What do you think it is about the relationships in the show that the fans are just crazy for? Like everyone has their ship, they're choosing sides. There's just a constant drive. Just the comments, the responses on your tweet saying you were going to do this interview were like, would you mind asking, let's talk about some of these relationships. Like there's just a hunger for it in this show that I've never seen before. Mm-hmm. So what is it about this show that drives that?
Well, they're such like iconic characters, and they're characters that they know from the comics, and they're invested in these characters, and they have so many sort of powerful moments in those like first few seasons. Yeah, it's understandable that they're as passionate as they are because they've watched these characters sort of grow up on screen and shared these really traumatic moments together and these really beautiful moments together. So, when they split up and break apart, get back together, I can understand why that will cause a lot of emotion. So
yeah,
there's something about these teenagers that I think our audience can really relate to, and I guess they kind of empathize.
It drives some people crazy. I mean, I'm not saying me, but I'm saying there are other people.
I just wanted to follow up.
But on an unrelated note, let's kick it over to Pete.
I just wanted to follow up on that. Like as a writer, like you're spending time in these people's heads. You're invested, maybe more so than a lot of the fans. Like, do you ship certain things, or is it hard for you to like let somebody else have a Archie episode where you're like, Archie wouldn't do that, you out of your mind? Or like is it easy to keep things at a distance, or is it tough?
No, I don't think I don't ship couple specifically. I think as a writer, you try to remain as objective as possible, and you want to tell the story. Like, you never want to lock yourself into one specific thing. The show has evolved over 6 seasons, and I think like as the show evolves, like the relationships are going to evolve as well. So you never want things to get stale or like kind of back our characters into a corner. You always want to keep them developing. So yeah, no, not specific. I don't specifically ship any couples. I know that'll probably upset some people, but
no, it's fine. We're all trending in a certain direction, and that's fine. That's fine. That's fine by me.
Well, that said, I think we could probably talk about some of the couples because, like you're saying, things have changed a lot, particularly in season 6, and certainly some fans have been upset about that. Some fans have been excited about that. We talked about Barchi a little bit and how it's not exactly a joke in the fandom, but it's almost like they've come together for an episode and then they break up the next episode and then go away for about a season. But it seems like, based on the event, based on where you're going, we're really tackling Barchi in a significant way. Why do you think it's taken so long to finally get there with them?
Well, over the time jump, their lives did move in these pretty radically different directions. Archie joined the Army, Betty joined the FBI. That was a long time. 7 years is a long time. So it's like one of those things where they just never kind of got the timing right back in high school. But now that they sort of have the opportunity to explore that romance again, that they're going to do it. So they also have like their own relationships too. So like Archie was with Veronica and Betty had her thing with Jughead for a while. So I guess these things just take time.
Yeah. And just, again, not plumbing for spoilers, but just because I know fans are nervous, we're not going to get back for the first episode and then Archie's going to have his heart ripped out again, right? Like they're actually going to...
Emotionally or physically?
Can you give me at least Barchi for 2 episodes coming back?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't really say specifically.
That's a good answer.
But they are, obviously they're together at the beginning of the season. So I can give you, at least give you that much.
That's one episode, man.
Yeah,
That's the beginning
we
of
got
one
one, boys.
We got one, baby.
All right. Well, let's talk about another one, which has been bubbling in the background for a while, but is new, which is Tabitha. Mm-hmm. We talked to Roberto about how excited he was about that. I interviewed Cole for my day job. He seemed very excited. What has been like playing with this new relationship between these characters?
It's been great. I really like those two on screen together. I think they have a great chemistry. It's been nice kind of exploring that relationship. It's nice how much Tabitha will support Jughead and Jughead will support Tabitha, and she's been really great to have like on the cast. And
totally cool. It's really interesting to me because we've sort of really only seen that together a ton through the Riverdale event where they're almost murdering each other.
Right. Yeah, everything's a little darker in Riverdale.
Yeah. Which I love. But we've seen them in such an intensity. It'll be interesting to see them sort of in a world where there's not a hammer coming at the back of your head.
A nice normal world like Riverdale, where things are always normal all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Always.
I was wondering if like the fan base has ever maybe helped you guys out, like pointed something out, been like, oh yeah, we didn't talk about Betty's cat that she had, and is that cat okay? Like, you know what I mean? Like, has there ever...
Pete, you can follow up on that. All Pete actually wants to know is if Toffee is okay. We have not heard about Toffee.
Some people are worried,
Toffee's somewhere.
Okay.
I don't think TBK has gotten to Toffee yet.
Okay, good.
Let me throw a theory out that I have. Is Toffee in some sort of cat briefcase? And if you don't know what that is, I talked to Roberto about it, and he agreed it was a good idea. It's a briefcase where the cat is inside it, and the front end has food, and the back end has a litter box. So it's a great traveling case for a cat like Toffee that's sort of on
can
the
go
DL.
Anywhere.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe Glenn's carrying that.
See, that's a Glenn move.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a Glenn move.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm in Glenn's head.
Great. I'm glad we got that out of the way. Just to kind of keep walking through the couples, we have also been playing with Veggie. Obviously, we don't know if they're going to go forward, but we had little touches of them in earlier season. Again, what's it been like having those characters work together and be together, even though it's been in this uber dark situation of Riverdale.
They're a lot of fun together. I mean, their personalities are big.
Yeah.
So I can understand why they got together. You know, Reggie's always kind of this arrogant, kind of loud mouth, the kind of jock. And I think that Veronica might see a lot of the qualities that she saw in Archie in Reggie. I think they're great together. They're a lot of fun to work with too, as well. Camila and Charles are really great people, and yeah, they've been great.
They seem to really be enjoying each other in the scenes that we've seen them. And I love the sort of low end scammer and a high end scammer coming together in that couple. Do you think Hiram would sort of appreciate Reggie as a partner for Veronica?
Yeah, sure. I think he would, because Reggie is like always looking out for her and cares about her. So yeah, I think he would.
Oh, it's interesting you went that way. I was thinking, he's kind of a slime ball like Hiram was. You know, he's going to take
Well,
out
he's
the man.
street smart.
Well,
he's street smart like Hiram was.
Street smart, and like we saw in the episode. And because I also think one of the things that bothered Hiram about Archie so much is he was too pure. He was like, he couldn't get him.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So he blew him up.
Yeah.
To get back to the couples, another one that's new for this season so far is Tangs, Tony and Fangs. And I think as much as it definitely makes sense from a parental perspective, it's caused a lot of agita on the part of the fans, whether they're shippers of Kangs or Shoney. We know that those things are always going to be part of the fabric some way, but what's it been like playing with that? And were there any concerns taking Kangs, Shoney, breaking them up and turning them into Tangs? What were the discussions like there?
Yeah, I don't think there were any major concerns there, because we had established Tony as bisexual early on in the series. I think that they became closer when they had this parenting process, and that relationship moved from platonic to romantic. I think it actually was kind of a nice sort of development for them, and it just made sense to us. So yeah. And
I'd be remiss if I didn't just ask you, Bughead, Varchie, any ones that I'm missing? I'll just throw some out there so that the fans don't get angry at me for not saying the names out loud.
What a journalist over here.
Bughead? Question mark?
The fans
Varchie?
wanted me to say these words.
I don't know. We got hit up by a lot of people. I mean, certainly, like, people are very tied to these ships. I understand you guys are playing with other things, but do you feel like those are always going to be a part of the fabric of the show in some way going forward, or is it more about you're enjoying this moment of playing with these new couples and, like you were saying, seeing where that's going?
Yeah, I think the romantic relationships are always going to have a big place on the show. It's sort of a balance. We want to tell a good story, and we also want to take the time to explore different relationships. So we try to make sure that we can do that in every episode.
I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but it seems like what you're saying is that, like, hey, we're going to see what happens, but we'll realize, like, Bughead's important, so we'll bring things back for a little bit of a reset every once in a while. But I'll also explore other things.
I don't want to put words in your head, but here's an exact script for you to read real quick.
Please say this back to me right now.
Yeah, we don't have any. I mean, there are no real end games. Oh. Maybe we had an idea of who was going to end up with who, very early on in the series. Mm-hmm. But I think that has kind of gone by the wayside a bit now. And so, yeah, we just want to make sure that we explore the relationships that are interesting and you can actually understand why these people get together. There's no certain characters that were they have to be together in the finale. We have to make sure it is sort of this process.
I feel like somebody should tell Veronica that, because she keeps going around shouting endgame, and maybe she could cut that out a little bit. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, we included the end game. I think Mary said it early. I think she said that she thinks Archie and Veronica are end game, and so once Mary said end game, that was also another thing that kind of went viral.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They were like, why are they using the term end game? And so whenever we use the term end game on the show, it's kind of a subtle nod to that moment.
I can't believe it. The Avengers even were referencing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Their subtitle.
Well, I do think part of the reason to talk about it, honestly, about the endgame thing that makes fans concerned is there has been a lot of talk about the end of the show. I'm not asking you, like, when is the show going to end? Tell me an exact date or anything like that.
Because I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't
but
let it end.
do you
man.
feel like there has been talk, Lily Reinhart got on Instagram and was like, I think we're going to have a 7th season and maybe that'll be it. And Cole has certainly talked about, yeah, I think we have these contracts and everything. So is there any sort of back of mind of, I know you're not solidifying the finale of anything like that, but are you in any way sort of coming up with like a rough off-ramp for some point far in the future, whether it's season 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever?
Not really. If we know that the show has a certain endpoint, then we would assess and sort of build that out to make sure that it aligns with the end of the series. But we've never had anything like that before. So as far as we know, we're still telling an ongoing story. There's no, at least not that I know of, there's no end date to this thing.
That's great news for our podcast also. So.
Yeah, I guess really it's up to Roberto and it's up to the actors whether they want to come back and do the show. I would love to write for Riverdale for as long as it's on the air.
I love hearing this because I feel like a lot of shows sort of talk the talk about like, we let the characters really drive us. And it's not always true, but it really feels like what you're saying and what the show feels like, that you guys are a creative engine that just is chasing this story and able to take it into something like Riverdale and heighten out of reality and then confidently come back and now we're going to tell more stories back in this world that touch on those things. It's all in continuity. Like, I feel like it's just such a creative, vibrant, creative show. And it's amazing that you guys pull that off.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, we want to make sure that every season is interesting. We never want Riverdale to be boring. As the show evolves, like we'll find new themes for the season. Sometimes it's like a crime genre, like sometimes it'll be a cult for like season 3. It's always going to be something bold and interesting, which I think is why a lot of the audience come back and watch every year.
Certainly why we come back and watch. Before we let you go, I do want to ask, is there anything, just maybe even theme-wise rather than spoiler-wise, you could tease about the rest of the season? Just because I think there's a lot of questions about, we have this event, like we said, we love the event. People are wondering, okay, you had these 6 episodes. What, if anything, is going to come over from those 6 episodes to the rest of the season? We've heard everything from maybe there's a character coming over to some of the thematic ideas or the emotional ideas will come over. So again, I know you don't want to get into spoilers and totally reasonable, but what, if anything, can people expect when it does come back starting March 20th?
My God. Well,
oh man, that smile you got I felt that.
Yeah. No, I mean, the characters will be dealing with new issues. I can definitely say we're doing something we've never done before with the characters and their stories. It's exciting. It's really exciting.
Well, one thing we do know about that maybe you can talk about a little bit, we know that Jughead is going to be suffering from some hearing loss, which I think goes back to the original, or at least one of the versions of the pilot that didn't get used. So what's it been like playing with that? How have you been treating that?
It's funny that you mentioned that because that was the version of the script that I read for the first time where Jughead actually was deaf. And it's funny because in that script, Jughead doesn't really appear until sort of the final moments of the episode. And it was such an interesting thing that like Roberto made Jughead a deaf character, and for whatever reason it didn't stick around. But yeah, it's always interesting putting these characters in different situations and seeing how they would adapt to something like hearing loss. It's kind of this devastating thing because so much of Jughead's life is like centered around hearing. Like he's like a big movie buff, and luckily he can still write. It's interesting putting them in these situations.
And this is a very technical question that I wanted to ask, but are you able to say how many episodes are in this season, or is it being kept loose because of COVID?
It's a full season. It's your typical 22 episode season, but I mean, everything as far as I know is still on track. Like production is still on track. So we should be able to do a full order season.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Exciting to hear. Brian, thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for chatting.
The show's amazing.
It.
Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry that I couldn't be a little more liberal with
We're here for the conversation.
Listen,
man.
You confirmed that Shoney was endgame, so that's all. That's all I need to know. So thanks. And if you'd like to support our podcast, patreon.com/comic book club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Crowdcast and YouTube. Come hang out. We would love to chat with you about Riverdale. iTunes, Android, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Riverdale Dark on Twitter, at Riverdale After on Instagram, Riverdale After Dark on Facebook, comicbookclublive.com. For this podcast and many more, until next time, we'll see you after dark.
The cat briefcase is coming!
Have you got me wanting?